We know how they do it. We know who does it. We have the names of all of their engineers, all of their employers. We have photos of everybody. So we made an arrangement to meet with an FBI officer, a very senior FBI officer in Washington, D.C. We showed the whole thing, and that officer was stunned. And when it was over, that officer was a 20-year veteran, said, Mr. Berntsen, you and your partner, business partner, whistleblower partner, you need to flee the city, because the moment the Bureau knows you're doing this, they will do whatever they can to destroy your investigation, to destroy your personal credibility. They will hunt you and try to ruin you. But the point is, in the end, they're all going to jail at some point. We will get you.
Welcome to Heroes Behind Headlines. I'm your host, Ralph Pizzulo. In today's special episode, we're breaking the story of a shocking 4-year investigation into election fraud in the United States and other countries, carried out by a group of government whistleblowers, which is the subject of my new book, Stolen Elections: The Plot to Destroy Global Democracy, which releases this month. Among the government whistleblowers is former CIA operations officer Gary Berntsen. For those who haven't heard his name before, Gary Berntsen is arguably the most decorated CIA officer in recent history. It's my great honor to welcome government whistleblower and former CIA operations officer Gary Berntsen as today's hero behind the headlines.
Heroes Behind Headlines with Ralph Pizzulo.
Okay, Gary, so let's just jump in. Tell us what a government whistleblower is, and then how, as a whistleblower, you came across this election case.
People that work in the whistleblowing business, and there's just very few people that have a company we're essentially professional whistleblowers. So we work against transnational criminal organizations. We identify the criminal activity they're doing and the financial illegalities that they are conducting. We collect information on that, which is their money laundering efforts. We build up a big case on that. We take it to very specific whistleblower attorneys that we work with. We present that information to them as like it's a criminal case, a major criminal case. And they do a write-up, like an indictment. And then they take that indictment, that document, which is called a filing, and they give that filing to the Department of Justice, the Department of Treasury, FinCEN. There's probably 8 different major whistleblower programs that you get paid under. But primarily what we're getting paid by is you get paid on the bank fines. And it's like 30% of the bank fines. It used to be up to 30%. It'd be like 15 to 30%. But then Senator Grassley, who is sort of like the father in the Senate of whistleblower programs, made an adjustment to it, and it's actually very economical. You get paid really well, but it takes years. So someone like us will go and we'll try to get financing. You can go to a litigation finance firm. You have a good case, and you can go to them, and they'll give you $1 million, but they charge you a lot of money. There's a lot of interest, and they want a small percentage they take of it. So that's how whistleblowers work on that. And then in my particular case, I'm a former, CIA officer, and I know how to conduct investigations and find information on very complex targets. And my partner did the same thing, but he did cases for the Drug Enforcement Agency. So together we were lethal against the transnational criminal organizations.
I understand that you came across this information while you were doing an investigation against drug trafficking out of Venezuela. Can you talk about that and how this information first came to you?
I was a CIA station chief. You have sources. You find people from that target country who have been involved with these criminals in the banking system or the government. You meet them, you develop relationships with them, you get them to share this information with you, and you start building your case. In the case of Venezuela, we had multiple cases. We had the government dealing over $50 billion from PDVSA, the national oil company. We had them laundering money, narco money with the Russians. We had them laundering money through the major banks, the global banks of the world. Look, the Venezuelans have, stole $1 trillion from the national oil company, 500 billion from the central bank. They do narco traffic of 25 to 40 metric tons a month. It's a $2 trillion transnational criminal organization, the Cartel del Sol. That's the primary group that we've collected against.
Yeah.
Even though we've collected against others. And so they are massive stakeholders in the international financial market and in the US and in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started collecting this information with Venezuelan sources again and again and again. And we kept seeing the same people over and over. And we saw them involved with individuals that owned election companies in one particular company. And one of our sources was a funder of that. One of our sources was directed by the late Hugo Chavez to put several $1 million in at the very beginning of Smartmatic. We were doing a particular case of a multi-billion-dollar filing that we were submitting to the Department of Justice. And one source kept telling me, I put money into Smartmatic over months. And the Smartmatic thing, I didn't have any idea. I didn't even think about election stuff.
Right.
And then after the elections, then when I first heard that, I was like, what's that? Didn't that source tell us that? My partner said, yes, that's smart. That's the election company he's talking about.
Right.
So we went back to him and said, wait a second, tell us the story of how you put in some of the first $5 million into that. And then he explained, Hugo Chavez directed me to do this. This is why they needed help. I had billions and this is how I was doing this. And so it was very, very interesting. And then we started following the string, you started pulling it apart.
Right.
And then we find our first really good source that was a software engineer that had been involved with them, that had done certain things for them, and debriefed him at length. And then he gave us another person, and we went to that other person. It's the human chain, it's like human intelligence is the second oldest profession, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
And as we started to do that on television, you had, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, all these other people, and we had spoken with them. Mm-hmm. But this is not something you can do overnight. You can't do this in a 3-month cycle. Yeah. Collecting intelligence, and I was in the business as an operations officer, and then later a senior officer and a COS, and led many programs. It takes time to develop information from hostile governments, and transnational criminal organizations are like a hostile government. Actually, they got more money than them. Governments are easier than these guys. Right. These guys are killers. And so you have to be careful as you do this. Yeah. And we went from one source to the next, and it took us several years to do this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we had to have money. Yeah. And so we use the money that's associated with doing a normal whistleblower case. And we directed some of those funds toward our travel and our sources that were reporting to us on election theft. No one else was spending a penny. No one else would spend a dime. No one would spend the time. Yeah. It's an effort of time and resources. Yeah. We spent the time and the resources, and the news got worse and worse, and we just kept pursuing. We just wouldn't give up because we understood the seriousness of what we were facing. We believed.
Yeah. And what did you find out? You found out?
Well, the first thing we found out is that the late Hugo Chavez, who had come to power in Venezuela in 1998 through an election. He had attempted a coup in 1993, went to prison for several years, was given an amnesty, got out, ran for office, and he won, legally became the president in 1998. He had moved the country radically left. It was a country whose economy was massive because they had as much oil as Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And they had a banking system there that was linked to the United States, and their oil was linked to the American refineries. It's a kind of a dirty oil, but it's linked to the refineries in Texas and Louisiana. And they I mean, it was a really big prize.
Yeah.
And Hugo Chavez moved it left, and then he had in the Constitution that they could do a recall against him, and he was facing recall in 2003. He was very close to the Cuban intelligence service. As of 1993, he was an asset of the Cubans. They had recruited him early on, and when they recruited him, there was a meeting, and when he was in that meeting, he was in the meeting with the Cuban intelligence service, and the Cartel was there.
Mm-hmm.
The Cartel was told, you're going to finance this at the direction of the Cuban DGI. So for his coup, 1993 was coordinated with the Cubans, and then the Cartel was funding him.
Wow.
Those guys were arrested, went to jail, the two brothers in the United States. One's just died. So in 2003, he's facing recall, and the Cubans say, the only way you survive is you're going to have to steal the election. So you need to take control of the election. So Jorge Rodriguez, who worked for him, was the head of the Consejo National Election. He had an individual that had a hardware company. So he had a guy named Majed Khalil, who was close to him, who was a Shia Lebanese guy that had immigrated to Venezuela. They found 3 engineers. The engineers were Antonio Mojica, Roger Peñate, and Alfredo Anzola. Those 3 individuals were graduates of Simón Bolívar University, very fine university, best university in Venezuela, and its computer program is linked to the computer program in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is a pretty good university. Actually, the president of MIT for the last couple of years is the Venezuelan. People don't realize that.
Yeah.
And so those guys already had a company in the United States. They had registered a company like 1997, 98, called Software, registered in Delaware, but they had opened an office physically in Boca Raton, Florida. And these guys went down to Venezuela, and they flew in, and they did their very first meeting on Ramp 4, that's the presidential ramp at Maicatica Airport, the airport there in Caracas. Hugo Chavez and Jorge Rodriguez and Diosdado Cabello were all present, and they met the 3 engineers. They talked to them. They explained what they wanted. They told them that, okay, they could do this, but they would need money, they would need time. Those engineers decided right away that they knew what they had to do. They had to build a source code. They had to build a program.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they needed to open a company first. So they opened up Smartmatic, a company called Smartmatic, but they needed a source code. So they had to assemble a team to build a source code. And the source code's got multiple languages in it, so it makes it really kind of confusing, computer languages. But after they would start working on the source code, they needed hardware.
Yeah.
So they flew off to Italy, and they went to Olivetti, right? Olivetti used to make electric typewriters. For anybody who's over 60, you probably remember that, and you and I are in that club,
That's right.
And they went to Olivetti, and they got lottery machines. And so they bought thousands of lottery machines back to Venezuela, and they conducted the first election. They put that source code in lottery machines. It's just like a casino.
Yeah.
The house always wins. And so they rigged the first election there, and they won it.
Yeah.
We have seen in Venezuela him do that, right? He changed the Constitution. We've seen Maduro steal an election in 2018. We watched him steal the 2024, the whole world saw.
Yeah.
If you are out there and you are listening to this podcast and you don't think the Venezuelans steal elections, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Anyone who says that is a moron. The whole world has watched them steal elections, okay?
Yeah.
Grotesquely.
Yeah.
And so they just didn't understand in the beginning that they stole that first election there, and it was in 2003. And then Hugo Chavez, he realized, hey, I can do things here. So he used that company to go international. He wanted to weaponize the ability. He wanted to be the big man in Latin America and in the world on the left, right?
Yeah.
Look, you had Gaddafi in Africa, right? Gaddafi wanted to make him sort of the king of Africa. He paid all these other countries off. Chavez wanted to do the same thing. He had all these left-wing allies, and he used the machine to help them win elections around Latin America. But also, he entered the United States with the machine. So Smartmatic comes into the United States in 2006. And where's the first place they go? Cook County, right? Illinois.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, Mayor Daley found a bunch of people to vote for John F. Kennedy back in 1960, right? Cook County is probably the most famous place in America for election theft. Yeah, actually, They're big up there. The Dominions big there now.
Yeah.
Separate issue. So the point is that they go to Cook County and they go to New Jersey, state of New Jersey, and they do primary elections for the Democratic Party in those two places. They come in and do those, but at the same time, they go and that's Smartmatic, they buy Sequoia. So there's a company called Sequoia that has been doing elections in the United States for 100 years. What Hugo Chavez wanted was he wanted credibility. He wanted that machine and this company to be recognized and respected. So he bought an existing company with existing market share, 22% market share. And they bought the company for about $16 million, which was a pittance because it had contracts in far in excess worth of that. There was a deal because the company that had done that was doing printing in their country, and they did some sort of swap in addition to the money, it was like additional contracts to do passports and currency. They purchased the company Sequoia. And with Sequoia, they got 22% market share. And then that source code that they built in the beginning, they moved that source code into Sequoia.
Yeah.
Now they've got Smartmatic doing some things, but they got Sequoia, they've got this there. And their plan is to make Sequoia a monster company, in the United States stealing elections. But there's a problem. A congresswoman from the state of New York, the city of New York, Carolyn Maloney, the fashion district, somebody said something to her.
Yeah.
Somehow she learned that this company had links to Venezuela. She wrote letters to the Secretary of the Treasury, John Snow, 2006, stating that this company, Smartmatic, has a particular type of technology. It's called HAT, H-A-A-T. The amazing thing is that whoever went to her must have been an engineer because they knew some of the things that would take us years to figure out. And early on, her letter was fantastic. Yeah. She had a software engineer explaining not only someone knew that they were from Venezuela, but somebody understood the engineering that was going on.
Right.
And so her letters were, when this all comes out and when it breaks, the irony is that Carolyn Maloney will have been the person that blew the whistle almost 20 years ago. Nobody listened. But then magically, she never followed up.
Yeah.
When all this came out about elections being stolen and Smartmatic and this and that, not a word from her or any staff or anybody that left.
Yeah. Yeah.
The silence is deafening.
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Back then it was of interest. Here she was the first one to call this, but then for some reason she's quiet.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Other people, the same thing. What happens is John Snow, she wrote actually two letters, and the second letter was just as good as the first in terms of content and discussing technology. And CFIUS, began an investigation of Smartmatic, of Sequoia.
CFIUS is an acronym for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, an interagency committee chaired by the Secretary of Treasury and charged with reviewing the national security implications of foreign investments in the U.S. economy.
And so Antonio Mujica, one of the three owners, and probably the most important of the owners, is kind of the lead guy because, the initial company that they had, it was like registered by him and his father. So he was kind of the leader of the three, the first among equals. He, recognized that he needed to do something. So he found a guy by the name of Jack Blaine, who was a retired naval officer. He set up a company, SVF Holdings. What they tried to do is transfer and sell the company over to this entity. And Blaine was never a member of the board or anything of that. He was president in name.
Yeah.
But they tried to sell it to themselves to hide from CFIUS.
Yeah.
CFIUS said, no, you can't do that. Ultimately, they would not disclose who they were. Look, one of the great stories, and people will see, and we have a website, right? StolenElectionsFacts.com, right?
Yeah.
Is that you're going to see that these companies and there were several companies that they set up. They set up Software Softer, they set up Vista R&D, Smartmatic. All of these companies, the original documents showed all of the links to Venezuela and actually showed that one of the owners was a guy by the name of Omar Montilla, who was an advisor to Hugo Chavez. He was his chief of staff. So who could you say that Venezuelans don't own it? The chief of staff to the president of Venezuela is on the ownership documents in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the FBI is too lazy, or the people there too stupid to know how to use sunbiz.com. You know, that's pretty hard to believe. You know, they can't go into the Secretary of State's office in the state of Florida and look up these things and find these. Actually, Lou Dobbs did story on this on CNN years ago and actually talked about Omar Montilla.
Yeah.
On an article in CNN during that period of time.
Yeah. But nobody picked it up.
An army of people in the United States have made an industry of throwing their bodies on top of and trying to defend Smartmatic when there has been a massive body of just open source evidence. In addition to the investigation we did, there's a truckload of open source information that proves it. So actually, they are claiming that. So the first point is, so he tries that, it doesn't work. You know, the SBS thing doesn't work. Jack Blaine later gives a statement, and he's got testimony that he's given. He's given a sworn oath about all that. So that's in our website, in stolenelectionsfacts.com. And you can see what they were doing. And then they're forced, CFIUS forces and compels them to sell the company, and they sell the company to Dominion Elections Systems, a company in Toronto.
To sum up what Gary has explained so far, in 2003, polls in Venezuela showed that President Hugo Chavez was trailing in a national referendum. On the advice of Cuban intelligence, he hired 3 Venezuelan computer engineers, Roger Piñate, Antonio Mujica Jr., and Alfredo Jose Anzola, to develop software that could be installed in electronic voting machines. This software was used to manipulate the results of the referendum in Hugo Chavez's favor. After the system was successful in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez gave the 3 engineers the money to spread their electronic voting software through systems in Latin America and then the United States, where it operated first as a company called Smartmatic, then Sequoia, and then Dominion. The software used in the voting machines of all 3 companies was the same software developed in and controlled by officials in Venezuela.
Now, Dominion is kind of an interesting company because they were created in 2003. So from 2003 to 2008, they only ran one small local election. So they really weren't much of a company.
In Canada.
Yeah. And we learned that Antonio Mujica met the owner, John Polis, at a conference in Bogota, Colombia. That's what we learned. I'm not even sure that we have that in the website, but I'll just share it with you.
Yeah.
And then out of that meeting, they establish a relationship, and they decide to sell this company. Dominion comes in and takes it over, and now you have Dominion becomes this force that now has 22% of market share in the United States, and the Venezuelans have found someone to step in front for them and to conceal the ownership of this company with the source code. Because remember now, Dominion has bought Sequoia.
Yeah.
Sequoia has got the source code. Let's start again. Smartmatic has the source code. Yeah. They buy Sequoia. They move the source code to Sequoia.
Yeah.
Dominion comes in and buys Sequoia, and with that purchase, they inherit the source code.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have that source code.
And Smartmatic continues. Okay.
Smartmatic continues.
Yeah.
And if ultimately the 2 companies have an agreement, Dominion will control the American market, and Smartmatic will control the international global market. The exceptions are that Smartmatic will do elections in Los Angeles County, and they will do them in Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rico issue gets settled in court later. Okay. So those are the 2 places Smartmatic does. The rest of it's all Dominion now. So Dominion will grow its market share.
Yeah.
it will grow to, over 30%. But what Dominion does is they have swing states.
Yeah.
They focus on their business in all the places. Interesting, all the places that really decide where the presidency is chosen.
Yeah.
Dominion's got all the key counties, and
So this was very strategically thought out.
This was thought out, and this is the Cuban intelligence service with the Venezuelans. Understand something. The Cubans, we had the Bay of Pigs many years ago where the United States tried to overthrow the regime. The Cuban intelligence service survives because they have to monitor America's trigger finger on them to see if they're going to act against them. That's how they survive, know?
Yeah.
And so the Cuban intel service has a very, very aggressive program where they penetrate our government. They target. They probably spend more money in South Florida than they do in Washington. They penetrated our political apparatus. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have a large number of people that are actually reporting to the Cubans, Cuban security services. This is another thing that's occurred while I've been doing the whistleblower work here, and we learned about election theft. We kept stumbling into people who were spying for the Cubans and the Venezuelans.
Wow.
But the Cubans were really the masters of directing that.
Yeah.
They have some very, very competent guys on the other side.
So they came up with this strategy, and they probably located the swing counties and the swing states.
They taught them all. Hugo Chavez looked to Castro almost as a father figure. He was born out of wedlock. He was raised mostly by his grandmother. Really didn't have a father. And when Castro played on that. Castro, Castro. The funny thing about Castro would send him a note every single day. He had a hawker, these jets. And they would fly in there. So Chavez was a monster.
Yeah.
You talk about Gaddafi, like Chavez was sexually assaulting women every single day. Wow. If you graduated first in the military academy, you were sent to the presidential palace, and he's raping them. And he's raping the wives of his generals. And he's raping the wives just nonstop. But if the Cuban ambassador knocked on the door, or somebody showed up from Havana with the letter from Fidel Castro, whatever murder or mayhem he was involved in, he would stop.
Yeah.
Go over, get the letters. What Fidel wanted him to do. I'm not kidding. It's crazy. The Cubans opened a house for him in Havana. And he would fly over there and spend weeks there because the house, was essentially a brothel. He would have 10 or 12 women from, Russia or Belarusia that were provided to him there nonstop.
Wow.
And they made it very comfortable for him. And Castro knew what this guy wanted. And while that was going on, Chavez, who had lost the financial support of the Russians. Remember, during the Cold War, the Russians would provide the Cubans with about $7 million a day. When the Soviet Union collapsed, that stopped. They had to find another financier. Ultimately, that financier became Venezuela for quite a long time, and it was the oil money. But Chavez would say, "Forgive $1 billion here, give him $1 billion there, billions." Right. I mean, it was unbelievable the way he threw money at the Cuban regime.
And they just must have been gloating. I mean, the Cubans.
Yes.
That
they had they worked for years to take control there.
And then once they had this election system in place that was stealing elections in the United States, they must have just been gloating, thinking.
And they just got better at it. And and then look, they used it in Argentina for the Kirchners. They used it all over the place. And they grew it and made billions with it. It was not just a political weapon, it was a financial bonanza. So initially you start with, Chavez directs it, but the owners of the machine, the two big investors, are Jorge Rodriguez, who is the head of the Consejo Nacional Electoral. He's head of their sort of assembly that they have now. It's not really a parliament, but it's a type of assembly they have. And the other one is Diosdado Cabello, who was a lieutenant when Chavez attempted his coup in 1993, but he's a longtime ally, but he's kind of more of a pure narco. So when Chavez died, the Cubans had to make a decision. Who do we make president next? They decided. And they went with Maduro. Maduro was a former bus driver, but he's a lefty ideologue that they made him a member of Congress, and then it made him the president. But they decided it was going to be Maduro. Maduro was their guy. Jorge Rodriguez is also their guy.
Yeah.
Jorge Rodriguez has been the vice president before, head of the Consejo Nacional Electoral, the former mayor of Caracas. He had a lot of big jobs. His sister's currently the vice president. She had been a chief of staff, but Jorge Rodriguez and Delcy Rodriguez, his sister, have both been assets, paid reporting assets to the Cuban intelligence services for decades. Why? Because their father was a leftist guerrilla in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Big time guerrilla, kidnapped a famous American there, was hunted down and was killed by the security forces.
Yeah.
So they believed that those security forces were led by the agency. I'm not so sure about the accuracy of that, but he was hunted down. He was killed. I believe he was taken up in a helicopter, shot, and thrown into the ocean. I think that's possibly the way that was done. But the point was that they hate us. They work for the Cuban government. They've been agents of the Cubans. This is a fantastic coup for the Cuban security services.
Of course.
Having all their people as agents of innocence and taking over an oil wealthy country in their hemisphere. Just masterful.
And then the election machines was probably just a cherry on the top.
It was a cherry on top. Probably not something they were expecting, but it worked out well. And Chavez was a able and willing partner that understood the importance of. Let me just say something else.
Yeah.
Diosdado Cabello, it was a military officer. He's got an engineering. He's the engineering degree. These guys are smart guys.
Yeah.
These guys didn't study social science. They're not history majors. They got engineers.
Yeah.
Right. They figured out what to do.
Now, when did they start? Okay, you talked about 2006 is when they started these two primaries. They just got better at it, and they earned more contracts.
How they get better at it's important is that the Consejo Nacional Smartmatic are co-located in a big building in Caracas. So you have hundreds of engineers, half of them from the CNE, half of them from Smartmatic, doing the engineering. So the engineering is supposed to have two goals.
Yeah.
Steal elections, defeat audit.
Yeah.
Defeat audit.
Yeah.
And so they think very carefully about how to do this.
Yeah.
And once you get into the United States and you start doing elections, so let's think about the United States.
Yeah.
Election day is 3,300 counties. Each run their own election.
Wow.
So every time you have a presidential cycle or you have 3,300, that's 3,300 separate elections are run. So you're running this and you're learning. As you're doing these, you're collecting the data. You're looking at, what counties don't matter.
Yeah.
You very quickly figure out what really matters. So what they had to realize is that when you steal an election, the first thing they thought about was data. The data is in what you call a poll book.
Yeah.
So the poll book is the data of. So if I'm Smartmatic and I come into Cook County, first thing I want is 30 years of voting records.
Yeah.
I want to know everybody's voted for 30 years, and I can see who voted, who didn't vote, who died, who's moved. You get all this data.
Yeah.
You pull this all together and you manipulate that data to identify low propensity voters because you're going to use those to steal votes. So you have this data. At the same time, the engineers are also working on the electoral management system where they are finding different engineering techniques to alter an election, whether it's the script, whether it's the tabulator, whether it's the ICC, the intercast. So I'll give you an example. You can steal them in tabulation, right? It's an easier place to steal them, but we had our engineers, the sources. We had ultimately would recruit a number of people that actually worked on the system and built the system and developed them and stole elections over the years. And they showed us a list of 14 different ways to steal an election, the engineering techniques.
Wow.
And then we got the wiring diagrams of the systems, and they showed us actually where they are in the system.
Yeah.
And then they showed that they can mix and match. So you could use 1 and 5 and 17. This place used 2 and 4 and 3. Yeah. I mean, it's like there's like 1,000 combinations you can use
that they built into the machine,
into the machine, into the software, right?
Yeah.
And so you have a source code which allows them to manipulate and do sorts of things, and then they build advancements on the source code. They do another program called the dynamic source code program, which lets them change the source code as the source code is running. I mean, look, they had hundreds of engineers in 20 years determined to do two things: steal an election, defeat audit.
Yeah.
One of the ways they defeat audit, they buy the audit companies. They own the audit companies. When people do an audit of an election,
Yeah.
they don't just go and count the votes. No, they go to the machine.
Yeah.
They set these machines up so they purportedly take pictures of everything, right?
Yeah.
And so, those are stored in groups of 100, right? They take a picture of 100 votes, and in a half a second, that the real photo is gone, and another one is electronically inserted, and it's got the votes they want. And that's stored in the machine. The real one's not there. So the votes that are stored in the machine don't match what's in the box. But when they do an audit, that's not the same thing as recounting by hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why, ultimately, we're going to need hand count.
Is there any hand record that's left that is accurate?
What happens is in the states, Ralph, a lot of states say you have to hold those ballots for 2 years or a year.
Yeah.
In the state of Georgia, those things were destroyed in 60 days. In some of these places, they were destroying the records.
Yeah.
They don't want those. By accident, everybody destroyed them by accident. They're destroying the ballot. They just want those things on the ballot, the electronic copies, because those have been altered. I suspect, maybe with AI, you could probably look at those photos and you might see minute markings on ballots and everything, and you could show that some of them are the same. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it takes really significant computer forensics to do that.
Yeah.
And they probably have, 500 of those different versions of those, but you probably see that some of them have been used duplicate time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who knows? They get sloppy. They use 10 of them, 1,000 times.
Right.
But the point is we know how they do it.
Yeah.
We know who does it. We have the names of all of their engineers, all of their employers. We have photos of everybody.
Yeah.
In the end, they're all, if you work for Dominion and Smartmatic, you do this, you're going to jail at some point. We will get you. And the reason is they're all cowards too, because a couple of them will flip right away and they'll give up everybody.
Yeah.
They'll give up there. There are already people. Now, some very brave people came forward.
Yeah.
Brave people came forward. They thought it was wrong and they were willing to help us. Really did brave things.
Right. And
but
you understand how the whole
if you understand how it works.
Yeah.
If you understand how it works. The other problem for the United States was that because the country is so polarized, if one candidate says elections are stolen, then half the country says no, they're not. You know what I mean?
Right.
They weren't looking at it as an intelligence or criminal investigation. They had to look at the fact.
Right.
Look, people know that I'm a conservative Republican. I've been my whole life, but I didn't approach this from political. I approached this as a political thing. Look, and even though I was a conservative guy, look, when I was in the CIA, especially in the 1990s, the Clinton administration, I did some great counterterrorism work for those guys. We did some great stuff. Probably out of all the people that I worked for in or at least political people that worked with us in counterterrorism, Dick Clark was the chief of counterterrorism at the White House for the Clintons. That guy was sharp. That guy was smart. He was dynamic.
Yeah.
I admired that guy,
Right.
He was better than some of the Republicans that came later. So I'll admit that.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
ultimately,
people on both sides.
Yeah. It's not about politics. It's about
This
protecting
is not about
the country and protecting the integrity of our elections.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. But the problem is the political situation drove people away because, they saw, all the people that came out early on and said, election theft were all didn't have the evidence, and they all wound up in body bags. It's like you just imagine this: the American democracy is this big building, and the building's on fire, and you have all those people in body bags on the ground. As whistleblowers were like firefighters that had to run up and go into a burning building, and no one else wanted to go. But it's okay. It's okay. We're big boys, and we're trying to see what's the truth here. One of the things that the agency is, you shall know the truth, and it shall set you free. That was the biblical statement. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And let me just say this. There are people on both sides of this thing. There are Democrats and Republicans that both know the game. And the truth here is for us, in the end, though, we will know because we have enough witnesses identified who were the engineers everywhere, and it's a global thing, that we will know what was done in what places.
Yeah.
Even though the physical evidence may have been destroyed, we will have witnesses that'll say, we stole this one, we stole this one we let go. Remember something. This is like a casino.
Yeah.
You have to let the suckers win once in a while too, if you want them to keep coming back.
Right. So the slot machines, you gotta win every once in a while. Yeah.
Every once in a while, you got to
keep-
win. You know?
Here's a direct quote from a cable written by U.S. political counselor to our embassy in Caracas, Robert Downs, on July 10, 2006. Quote, Smartmatic is a riddle. The company came out of nowhere to snatch a multi-million-dollar contract in an electoral process that ultimately reaffirmed Chavez's mandate and all but destroyed his political opposition. The perspective we have here, after several discussions with Smartmatic, is that the company is de facto Venezuelan and operated by Venezuelans. The identity of Smartmatic's true owners remains a mystery. Our best guess is that there are probably several well-known Venezuelan businessmen backing the company who prefer anonymity either because of their political affiliations or perhaps because they manage the interests of senior Venezuelan officials. Gary, talk for a minute about the global nature of this, because while Dominion is
Dominion is the
setting
culprit
up
in the
here
United States.
in the
with
United
the
States,
source code.
Smartmatic is expanding overseas.
They went everywhere. So Smartmatic itself is in dozens and dozens of countries. First off, let's start with this. Smartmatic is in the United States. They moved Smartmatic. Well, they register the ownership in Curacao, right?
Mhm.
Curacao is the island off of Venezuela, but it's Dutch owned.
Yeah.
Why do you do it in a Dutch owned place? Because the laws in the Netherlands provide the single greatest corporate protection, corporate secrecy.
Mhm.
And we have copies of all of their corporate structures.
Mhm.
And so what started as a simple country there has this wiring diagram with like 4 tiers, and they have offices and ownership things in, 30 different places. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But because they have, it starts in the Netherlands, they get their corporate secrecy, and they're hiding the fact that, what they say is it's owned by Antonio Mujica, it's owned by Roger Piñate and Alfredo Anzola. Anzola, by the way, died in the early years.
Mhm.
He died in the early years because he slept with Diostado's wife, and he wound up getting murdered by Diosdado Cabello.
Yeah.
He was in a plane that took off. They tinkered with the plane. It crashed. He didn't die. They had to kill him in the hospital. That's the way it goes down there. So the Mujica family, though, he has himself, he has Piñate, but he has his brother-in-law, a guy named David Moreno, who's involved in all of this. Piñate was recently charged in Miami for stealing elections in the Philippines, right? In 2016.
Right.
Ellie Moreno from the Moreno family, the Mujica's wife, was involved, and he was indicted as well for that.
Yeah.
But David Moreno is the guy that really had significant responsibility for technology and the source code.
Uh-huh.
So I tell everybody source code. You learn about this, and you asked about, and they move that source code around the world. How does Smartmatic do this? Well, first off, they had to manufacture machines. They got the machine manufacturing.
Right.
So where do they manufacture the machines? China.
Yeah.
Okay, the People's Republic of China. You don't think those machines are communicating?
Mhm.
Look, the Dominion machines are also manufactured. They were for a long time in violation of U.S. law. They were manufactured in China, outside of Beijing. They shipped them over to a factory in Taiwan. They were white labeling them over there, sending them both to Smartmatic and to Dominion, for Los Angeles County and Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And for the other swing states. And then they were used here.
Yeah.
In violation of U.S. law. So we have a source code created in Venezuela, and we have the hardware in China. What could possibly go wrong? Just so people understand this, CFIUS, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
The Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, 3,100 employees and a $2.9 billion budget.
Mm-hmm.
They're responsible for infrastructure security at all levels. I think they spend most of their time as like public relations office for Dominion and Smartmatic. And actually, after 2020, and there was an outcry on this, what they did is they got on the phone with both Smartmatic and Dominion to figure out how to message. So let's call criminals, when you have to do a response. But the Smartmatic took those machines from over there and then used them everywhere. Remember something, the hardware communicates.
Yeah.
The hardware is allowing them to communicate. When people say that that hardware is not communicating, It's just insane. They just don't understand that you can do stuff with hardware to allow it to communicate. They
Right.
were communicating, like, they were communicating via the internet. They were communicating via Wi-Fi, communicating via satellite.
Yeah.
I mean, the engineers talked to us and said, look, you Americans are just really naive and your people are just really dumb. Your technical people are dumb.
Yeah.
And it was just so easy.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
But let me just say this, the
Yeah.
software, and Ralph, your question was, have they used it internationally?
Yeah.
Up to maybe 70 countries around the world have had that source code in their software, and they're stealing them. Elections have intervened in elections all over the place. And you'd think the British people would want to know this. How many of those places are in the Commonwealth? We fought to contact people here. Like, we went to Congress, we went to the FBI, we went to the Department of Justice, and those are stories that are really interesting to hear. But I thought about trying, and we never had time or had success. But I'd like to talk to the King of England. Say,
Yeah.
Sir, Your Highness.
Yeah.
Probably 20 countries in the Commonwealth that you have a constitutional role in.
Yeah.
Have been stolen
Right.
by a company that's now headquartered in London.
Yeah. Yeah.
Smartmatic runs in London.
Yeah.
And for a lot of years, ladies and gentlemen, they had a guy who was the president of Smartmatic, or their global chairman, and that was Lord Mark Malloch Brown. So Mujica and Peñate wanted credibility, and so did the Venezuelans. So they hired Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who had been the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, was their mouthpiece, their standard bearer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give me a break. And so he did all of that up to 2020. He was with them for a number of years. And now, of course, he's the head of the Open Society Foundation with George Soros.
Wow.
And the Open Society Foundation we have a lot of documentation and contact between them and coordination with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Open Society Foundation has played a role with this.
With the election companies in Venezuela. Yeah.
With Smartmatic.
With Smartmatic. Yeah. Wow. Wow. So controlling the global elections particularly.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Gary, what is the role of China? Because you mentioned them before in terms of manufacturing the machines. What other role do they play?
The Chinese are interesting because the Chinese came in with Dominion, on the Dominion side. So, the Cubans probably play the bigger role with Smartmatic itself, well, the Chinese, the manufacturing. But you have a company called Staple Street Capital, and investments were from there, and we believe that money was China. Mm-hmm. There's some documentation that shows that UBS Securities put significant money. Mm-hmm. We had like $100 million, maybe the 2012 or 2013 timeframe, and it was literally, I think they put $300-400 million in 3 weeks before the 2020 election. Dominion, early on, John Paulus had a roommate in college. His name is it's a hard name for me to pronounce. Mm-hmm. Obradovich, Goran, I think is his name. Yeah, Goran Obradovich was close to him in college. He hired him. He's a computer guy, software engineer. Mm-hmm. And he opened the office in Belgrade, Serbia. Mm-hmm. So Dominion, which does all swing state voting, has its research and development office, not in America, but in Belgrade, Serbia.
Wow.
And in Belgrade, Serbia, the Chinese installed for them Huawei servers. If you're a swing state voter, know this. Your election history and all your data is secure in Belgrade on a Chinese server, on a Huawei server that is linked to IP addresses in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
No problem there.
No.
I don't see any problem with that. Yeah. Holy tamale.
Yeah.
So you have the Serbians. So understand something. The Serbians were allies for many, many years with the Russians. They've always been close to the Russians. Russia's had significant financial problems. The Chinese have come in as the big player. So Chinese investment is king in Serbia. And so they are very close to them.
Yeah.
And so the Chinese actually have Chinese engineers, Venezuelan engineers, and Serbian engineers are working for Dominion there, and all have system administrator status. They can enter and they participate in the process of altering votes in the United States. Wow. They store all that stuff on those Huawei servers and they hold them there, and they hold that stuff in Hong. They can hold it in Hong Kong because they have very complex architecture of how they're hooked together, the VPNs, all that. I'm not a computer engineer, but I've learned quite a bit about this.
I'm sure.
For an old guy.
Yeah.
China's big in this, and actually, China's bigger than even Cuba now. China, because China will actually come in and pay to have elections stolen in particular places. They'll make the payments.
Yeah. So you've got Cuba, you've got Venezuela, you've got China, you've got Serbia. Are there other countries?
Iran. Yeah.
Okay.
The Iranians too have engineers on the ground in some places. For years, the Venezuelans had, I mentioned earlier, you had Smartmatic and the Consejo Nacional Electoral, had engineers together on the ground. But in 2017-18, an election was stolen, was so egregious that the Venezuelans allowed Smartmatic to sort of denounce the CNE for intervening in elections, and they pulled out there. And what they were trying to do is just protect their brand globally.
Right.
And so a new company that has a head office in Argentina called XCLE, XCLE, came in, but XCLE has significant links with the Iranians. And we have significant evidence that Iranian oil money is in the mix here, paying for the manufacture of the machines in China.
Wow.
So the Iranians too, in the 2020 election, do you know where the Iranian foreign minister was? He was in Caracas watching the election. He was watching
our election
as a guest to the Venezuelans so they could show him how they can steal it and watch us do this. Now, where's the government? Where's the CIA? Where's the FBI? Where are these guys?
That was my next question. Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. There's some serious intel issues here. Okay, terrible intel issues here. A number of the individuals that were involved in this, there were Americans involved in this, and there were Venezuelans involved in this, were sources of the CIA. So they were reporting to the CIA. A number of them, though, were double agents. They were actually on the payroll of the Cubans, were really working for the Venezuelans, reporting false information back to the United States, were double agents.
Yeah.
And the CIA was completely outplayed in that. But there are, if I was to show you a wiring diagram of the first 6 people, the most important 6 people that were involved, 1, 2, 3 of them were involved as reporting sources to the agency.
Wow.
Look, we went to the agency early on doing our whistleblower stuff, even before we got to the election stuff. And we showed them, because we knew that there was an American citizen, a really important American citizen, who was a gigantic agent of theirs. Yeah. And Frank Holder is his name. He's an American citizen. Operates out of Miami. Former Air Force, was in the embassy in Argentina. He's really a principal agent of, he works both with the Cubans and the Venezuelans. And he was reporting to the CIA for years. We went and we literally took our filings and dropped 500 pages of evidence on things. Here's him money laundering for the cartel. Yeah. Here it is. Yeah. Again and again and again. We knew the DEA had gone to the agency and tried to act against him. They said, no, he's ours. You can't do this.
Yeah, he's our source.
And then there's another guy, Majed Khalil, who's attached to Jorge Rodriguez. Also source to the agency for years. And they wouldn't allow the DEA to arrest them. Yeah. And because they said they're ours. But these guys were the principals. Majed Khalil's job was to provide the hardware in the early years for Smartmatic to help guide that process. But he is a major narco producer and distributor of Venezuelan cocaine into Iran and in Hezbollah, which helps ultimately do financing of terrorism. It's a disaster. We went to the agency. We showed them this stuff. They wound up terminating some of these guys. Yeah. But these were kind of ugly meetings, you know. And
I can imagine.
It's like I had a lot of years there. I had fond memories of there, but they're not that all happy to see me these days.
Now, there's another part of this that you referred to earlier, and that is the drug trafficking, right? An organization that called the Cartel del Sol that a lot of people have never heard of before.
The Venezuelan government is the Cartel del Sol, the Cartel of the Sun. The president, Nicolas Maduro, has a $15 million bounty on his head. Now, it's called the Cartel del Sol because it's the Venezuelan government, but the Venezuelan army is the logistical arm of the cartel. So instead of stars on their epaulets, they have suns. So it's the Cartel of the Suns. Yeah. Because the army moves all the drugs. Yeah. So the Venezuelans helped organize the peace accord in Colombia. They paid Colombian political figures to normalize their relationship with the FARC. FARC became a legal political party. Now you have Gustavo Petro,
Right.
former M19 guerrilla, as the president. He's a piece of crap, that guy. All right. Look, Americans need to know the M19 guys used tanks, stormed the judicial capital 40 years ago, and murdered like 12 to 14 judges. He claims he wasn't there. He had a day off, you know.
Right.
Anyway, he's the president of Colombia.
Yeah.
So they normalized the FARC. They became a political party, which allowed them to weaponize all their drug money. They took over legally took over the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Hugo Chavez allowed the FARC to relocate massive resources into southern Venezuela, and the southern half of the country has been turned into a gigantic cocaine production facility. They ceded half their country to a drug cartel.
Wow.
And they used their ports and their airport as logistical bases for the cartel. So the country has become the largest narco producer. But you know, in the last couple of years, the Biden administration has done everything possible to normalize their relationship.
Yeah.
It was Donald Trump charged these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other, nobody else wanted to charge them.
Yeah.
DEA for years built these cases. And when Trump got elected, the former ambassador, a guy that was the ambassador to Venezuela, knew they were bad, a guy named Brownfield, Ambassador Brownfield, was temporarily in a chair over at the State Department. He was able to grab those things and push them forward. He indicted 8 of the people: Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, Vladimir Lopez Padrino, you know, the whole group of them. He got, and it's like, you know, 8 of these guys are all indicted.
Yeah.
It's a narco cartel, the country there.
Yeah. They control the cartels in Mexico and throughout Central America. Yeah.
Remember something, the guys in Mexico, everybody says, oh, the Sinaloa cartel, oh, the Gulf cartel, oh, the Pacific cartel, okay? Those guys are logistical people. They just move stuff. The real Walmart of this stuff is down in Venezuela.
Yeah.
And their ports and their airfields and everything like that. That's it. Those are the big boys. It's a $2 trillion criminal enterprise. It's 10 times the size of the Italian mafia.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's massive. They did things. Look, Hugo Carvajal, who was their chief of the DHCM, the Directorate General of Counterintelligence Military, he's in jail. He's in waiting prosecution in New York for drug trafficking. Mm-hmm. But for many years, he would fill the diplomatic pouch with cocaine and cash, ship that off to Madrid, and they built the political party Podemos there. Mm-hmm. That means we can.
Yeah.
They became coalition partners in that government.
Yeah.
The Spanish government and NATO ally is utterly penetrated and controlled by the cartel. They're puppets of the cartel.
Wow.
And they're just one country in the world. Listen, the Cartel del Sol is like Spectre in FBI movies.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me, in James Bond movies, right?
Right. Right.
Spectre. I mean, I'm not kidding you.
Yeah. Yeah. They have so much money. Yeah.
It is gigantic.
Yeah.
DEA, SOD, Special Operations Director, great guys, did great work against Hezbollah and other people, had a 10-man unit operating up to those guys up to 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. The Biden administration dissolved that and has one person in SOD doing Venezuela.
Wow.
Explain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you stop collecting on them?
Yeah.
Why would you diminish
criminal enterprise in the world?
Why would you diminish your capacity to collect on the most dangerous and largest? And they did that while we were bringing one filing after another to them. And they fired and just sent off people to do other things. Oh, we have to chase fentanyl.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, fentanyl's a problem when you open the border.
Right.
But the issue here is U.S. law enforcement, what the FBI should have as their number one priority is battling transnational crime.
Yeah.
That's not what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not what they're doing.
Yeah. And China, I understand, is also involved with the Cartel del Sol.
Of course. Well, they're involved with, they put billions of dollars into Venezuela. Mm-hmm. There was a thing called the China Project where they invested like $30 billion in there. And they just, the regime and the Chinese oligarchs stole the money. They didn't really invest it for the people, you know. But the Chinese are heavily involved with them.
Yeah. And in the money laundering.
And laundering oil.
Yeah.
They're sanctioned. Venezuela's sanctioned, but that doesn't matter to the Chinese.
Yeah.
They don't care about those sanctions.
Right. We'll help you out. We'll help you
Yeah.
avoid it. Yeah. Yeah. Just pay us.
We'll launder your money. You'll
Yeah.
take your oil.
Right.
They don't care.
Right. No. China not only collaborates with the Venezuelans in terms of money laundering and election fraud, but through the Cartel del Sol, they also work to import dangerous drugs like fentanyl into the United States. The following is an excerpt from an April 16, 2024 report from the House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Quote, "The substance is fentanyl, a deadly synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times stronger than heroin. Fentanyl kills on average over 200 Americans daily, the equivalent of a packed Boeing 737 crashing every single day. The People's Republic of China, under the leadership of the CCP, is the ultimate geographic source of America's fentanyl crisis. Companies in China earlier produced 97% of illicit fentanyl that entered the United States. Today, these Chinese companies produce nearly all fentanyl precursors that are used to manufacture illicit fentanyl worldwide. The PRC's central role in the fentanyl crisis is uncontroversial, acknowledged by administrations of both parties and the bipartisan U.S. Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Trafficking. The Drug Enforcement Administration and Department of Justice indictments and independent experts have reached the same conclusion." Now, Gary, these are all just shocking charges. And I know you, after the election in 2020, you were just starting your investigation, and
Right.
you presented some of this evidence to the Trump administration because they were surprised by the result of the election and they saw some irregularities based on their exit polling and so on.
When we first had contact, it was during the Trump administration. So we've been whistleblowing for like 6 years. So the first 2 years, we were giving filings. It was the Trump administration. We did the election stuff. It was the Biden administration. We initially went to the Trump administration when the election happened during those 3 months, during the transition. We did go to them and we gave them information that showed, that was Giuliani and Sidney and others said, look, you had a problem here. The problem was they hired a company that was owned by the cartel or that was involved with the cartel. They hired BRG, Berkeley Research Group, but its Latin America section was headed by Frank Holder, who was working with the cartel. So they came back with an answer that, there's no election fraud. Well, he was the guy that helped build this thing.
Yeah.
They hired the one American that was actually involved in helping the Venezuelans construct the machine that steals elections. And the Trump administration hired him, or the Trump campaign hired him, in the aftermath of the election of 2020. Right. And that was the guy said, no election theft here. It's hiring Bonnie and Clyde, is there a robbery of a bank over there? No, nothing here. No news here.
Now, as you progressed in your investigation and you started to put together all this information, which when you see it all on the website, it's overwhelming. Did you start, I know you did, but can you talk about the process where you started going to federal agencies and members of Congress and so on to try to get support?
I'm a guy that did 4 years in the Air Force. I did 2 years in the commissioning program for the Marines, didn't take the commission, went to the CIA instead. I've got and then I did some contract work in Afghanistan. I probably got 30 years working in the U.S. national security apparatus in one way or the other. I kind of believe in the government. And so when we did all of this, we started pulling this together. We did about the first 2 years. And look, after 2 years, we knew exactly what we had. We didn't have the large number of witnesses we had. We met half of them, and it was really sound. So we made an arrangement to meet with an FBI officer, a very senior FBI officer in Washington, D.C. And when we met with that officer, we did a 2.5-hour presentation, showed the corporate ownership of Smartmatic there. We did the stuff with Dominion. We showed the engineering. We showed the whole thing, and that officer was stunned. And when it was over, that officer was a 20-year veteran, said, Mr. Berntsen, you and your partner, business partner, whistleblower partner, need to flee the city. I said, excuse me? You need to flee the city, because the moment the Bureau knows you're doing this, they will do whatever they can to destroy your investigation, to destroy your personal credibility. They will hunt you and try to ruin you. When I heard that, I was just shocked. Look, I had very senior FBI officers work for me when I was a senior guy in the CIA. This had not been my experience, but, I've been retired for 15 years, almost 20 years now. And
Wow.
so I was stunned. And that officer said, flee the city. Do not bring this to the FBI. You will get hammered by them. They'll come after you. And so my partner and I, and we had talked to our whistleblower attorneys.
Yeah.
We're just all aghast. We said, okay, we'll go on our own. So we continued, and we built the case and built the case. 7 months ago, 7 months before the election, we made contact with a U.S. attorney that we know, and that U.S. attorney and 2 AUSAs, and we brought our whistleblower attorney with us, and we did a 3-hour slide presentation showing all of our evidence. And I had a lot of respect for that U.S. attorney, and I mean, they looked at that, and him and his men, they turned white.
Yeah.
Blood drained out of their faces watching it. They wouldn't take possession of the information. I was trying to put it into their hands. They didn't want it.
Yeah.
So we don't have a law enforcement officer who can't take possession of it, but and they took detailed notes. And they said, we will report this. What you have is so explosive. It's just, we're really horrified.
Yeah.
And we will do a detailed report, and we will send it to the Office of Public Integrity. They will contact you, probably send FBI guys to you, and then just work with them, give them everything, and do your thing with them. Because my business partner and I are probably the most prolific whistleblowers that have ever worked with the U.S. government. We give more material. Now, they haven't, I'll go back to that in a minute, though. We assumed, okay, they're going to contact us.
Yeah.
Month after month after month, dead silence.
Wow.
No, and then I had a conversation, after about 3 months with that U.S. attorney, and he asked me, has anybody contacted you? And I said, no, they have not. Silence is deafening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could just hear him sigh because he knew. So the truth is the Department of Justice was told that this exists.
They didn't do anything about it.
They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to, no. And they'll say, oh, it was 7 months out, it's too close. Look, we're making these public announcements before the election because we tried to go to the FBI. I tried to go to the Department of Justice. I went to congressmen. I went to a number of congressmen, Republican congressmen. They were terrified.
Yeah.
Look, some of them, if you ask them now when they're confronted and say, did you talk to Gary Berntsen and his partner? And they'll say, oh, yeah, we did, but we didn't think there was enough evidence. No.
Yeah.
Some of them said to us, we can't stand alone on this.
Yeah.
Too many people have been destroyed. We're afraid.
Yeah.
We just can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to have my crew. Look, they all get nice salaries. They got a great life. They're on Fox News. Give me a break. But none of them would stand and fight. None of them. I'm ashamed for these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm ashamed that I ran for office. I ran for the Senate once, right? It's like these elected officials in our country are not going to protect us.
Yeah. Wow.
They're just the American people have to stand up and fight.
Yeah.
And fight for the Constitution,
Right.
To defend it. They have to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say fight for it, I'm just saying, look, I believe in the rule of law. I want people to, my heroes are Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, people like that.
No, we can't have, we certainly don't want foreign countries who are antagonistic to us determining the results of our elections.
Yeah, we have to stand up for ourselves. But the problem is, and a lot of the Republicans were like saying to me, well, Jim Jordan won't let us. Jim Jordan, I must have heard Jim Jordan's name 20 times. He won't let us come in with that. I didn't go to Jim Jordan's office, but I went to, a number of these, and I went to a couple of Senate offices.
Yeah.
And Republican Senate offices. I didn't go to any Democratic offices because I thought they would just throw me out, because, they'd say you're some election denier. But, we went to offices of really some heavyweights, and they didn't want to see it. There is one senator that did listen to us and has tried to help us. One very fine guy. I'm not going to say his name right now, but one very fine senator, it'll eventually be named public, has done a lot to help us. I'm proud of him. But 99% of them, no.
Now, I know that Dominion had sued Fox News, and that was a big case. And I think Fox News ended up paying like $700 million.
787.5 million.
Wow. And how much of that do you think that the outcome of that lawsuit has scared people away from talking about this issue?
It was terrified people. But remember, we went and contacted Fox News. We made contact with Fox News. We briefed an attorney that was in contact with, Rupert Murdoch.
Mm-hmm.
He sent the attorneys, I think it's called Winston and Straw up in Chicago, their defense attorneys. By the time we met them, I believe they had already billed for 75 million, something like that. They already had a plan to surrender.
Yeah.
We showed them our full briefing with all of this evidence. I could tell that lawyer was horrified because he knew, oh no, I haven't accounted for any of this.
Yeah.
And then Fox sent surrogates to see us and look at it again. Fox knew, forget the briefing.
Yeah.
They knew we had witnesses. They knew we had people that had worked there, that had participated in it, and would take an oath. Those witnesses have a former assistant U.S. attorney as a lawyer. We have statements already taken. And so Fox News, this was probably during the primary process, the Republican primary process, decided it was easier for them to get on their knee for Dominion and paid them $787.5 million when they knew that they were stealing elections.
Yeah.
They knew.
Incredible.
It's a shocking thing. Look, I must have appeared on Fox News 200-300 times over a period of a decade.
Yeah.
I was a guest on many of their shows. I have tremendous respect for their journalists. I think they're really fine people. They're corporate people, not so much.
What you describe and what you and your partner have uncovered here is a huge international conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
So it requires an understanding of international politics, particularly Latin American politics. It requires an understanding of, criminal cartels, all kinds of money laundering, international money laundering. Also being able to unravel this whole sort of serpentine process of covering companies and covering ownership of companies. I mean, it sounds as though like what the two of you have done, like an incredible and hugely patriotic job that should have been done by a whole task force of different agencies, right? Because it is so complicated. And also you have to have the engineers to be able to understand, all the computer technology behind this.
We had to build this capacity. Fortunately, look, I'm 67 years old. So 30 years in the national security apparatus, and I studied Russian in college. I'm a Persian speaker. I speak Spanish. Had major jobs. Look, when I was the chief of Hezbollah operation, I had responsibility for the bombings of the Israeli embassy in Argentina, the EMEA building in Argentina. I was in charge for the bombing of Khobar Towers. I led the deployment for the bombing of the U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, Nairobi, and Nairobi, Kenya, and in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And then, of course, I did the invasion of Afghanistan. But so I had a lot of, I probably had more investigative experience on big, complex cases than anybody that exists in the FBI. I find the FBI officers that I meet these days are very, very young. It's a young service.
Yeah.
Very inexperienced.
Yeah.
I'm sure 2/3 of them I meet don't even have passports. I don't think they've traveled out of the country much, and nobody speaks any foreign language. The thing that was interesting is my partner speaks native Spanish. And clearly, even though we had Latino FBI officers and DEA officers and prosecutors, very few of them had the sufficient Spanish to debrief the sources on these complex topics. Wow. They would have to have my whistleblower business partner would have to do all the translations. I mean, most of these guys, I guess, speak Spanish well enough to say, "Mommy, I want cakey." They just don't. They just don't have university level Spanish. They just don't. And I was a little shocked by that. The level of skill in the national security apparatus has eroded.
Yeah.
It's eroded terribly.
That's what this clearly demonstrates. Like as we've been sort of asleep and arguing among ourselves over politics and tactics and ads and silly stuff, our enemies have been, you know, really penetrating our entire election system and have been stealing our democracy from under our feet, right under our noses. Yeah.
It is the worst political crime in our history since 1861 when Jefferson Davis tore the country in half. The South, we didn't talk about it specifically, but look, ladies and gentlemen, they have been stealing our elections since 2008. They've been in every presidential election,
Yeah.
House seats, Senate seats. They don't steal every single election. They steal the ones they need to,
Yeah.
the ones
Yeah.
they want to.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
as we said, it's a casino.
Yeah.
You have to let people continue to win, so
Right.
they'll continue to show up.
So they're choosing who our president is going to be.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a heartbreaking thing. I look back though and when I think about this particular investigation, this is, even though I'm retired and I started this thing like at 63, 64, I'm 67 now. The single most important thing I've ever done for my country is this.
Yeah.
This is more important than any of the work I did in the agency, more important than seizing Kabul, more important than anything that I did before.
Yeah.
Because those things were attacks on us. Maybe we lost lives.
Right.
But this is an undermining of the principles of our country, the democratic principles of our country. And our election system is the basis of that. And this is an assault on it. But I would tell everyone, if, in addition to reading, Stolen Elections, The Plot to Destroy Democracy by Ralph Pizzulo, people need to read, Unrestricted Warfare.
Yeah.
These two PLA colonels.
That's right.
They talk about how they want to destroy the United States to Chinese without firing a shot, stealing our technology, conducting lawfare, all those things.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, as you said, I've written a book and it's coming out in a couple of weeks, and it's part of this whole effort to sort of put this case out to the public, right? So that the public demands that there be like an investigation and arrests, and that our election system be reclaimed. So it's ours. It doesn't belong to somebody else. When I was brought into this, I was writing a book about China, and Chinese had been hiring thieves in Europe to steal back Chinese artifacts. And one of the things that I learned was about this feeling that is really strong sentiment that is taught to Chinese school children and is really pushed by the Chinese Communist Party. It's about the century of humiliation. And for the Chinese, they feel as though they were humiliated by the West for 100 years, starting with the Opium Wars. And what they need to do is to get back at the United States, but not get back at Western Europe, but not in a confrontational way, a direct confrontational way, but by undermining like their institutions and their societies. So it's interesting that this fits into
perfectly
that strategy exactly, right?
It's unrestricted warfare is what it is.
Unrestricted warfare.
And in this particular case, we have an electronic coup that they're conducting against us. It is without firing a shot. It's cost effective. It's a brilliant operation against us and damaging to our society. And there have been things that have come out recently in the last couple of weeks. The intelligence community has said no threat for foreign intervention in our election. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence announced that we've done a review and there's no threat to the election, and that it's just shocking.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
It is shocking.
And they are all going to be held to account, because what you and I have discussed today will all be considered fact shortly.
Yeah.
It'll be recognized as fact. And just like the Hunter Biden laptop story, the laptop's not real. It's not real. It's not real. And they went and found a bunch of former agency guys that were willing to lie for them. In this particular case, nobody, my business partner and I have invested years, and they didn't pay us, and we had no contact with Republican Party. We went to conservative congressmen because I thought they would have an interest in this, because some of them had talked about election fraud. But when I got to them, they didn't have any appetite for a fight or to take this on. No, we took this on when everyone else ran away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys are heroes, that's for sure.
That's very kind of you.
You
Well,
are.
you're a
You
brave
are.
man coming in
Yeah.
and write a book on this now.
No,
Because
no, no. You guys are heroes, and you will be recognized as such. Once the American people look at this evidence, which now they'll have a chance to do, they're going to be shocked, and they've got to demand action on the part of their government. And people have to forget their shock and forget their self-interest and realize, like, hey, we're under attack, and maybe we missed it before, but here it is. Here's the evidence, and unless we want to absolutely like lose our country and our democracy and be a, I don't know, satellite of China and Venezuela, which is what a sad commentary that would be. We've got to take action.
when we went to them, we discussed with them what we also saw was significant counterintelligence threats to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We knew people were spying against us.
Mm-hmm.
For people here, recent man arrested was Ambassador Manuel Rocha.
Yeah.
We brought that to the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Because he was in contact with Frank Holder.
Yeah.
I knew Rocha.
Yeah.
We sent the Bureau after him. We explained how all of this worked, and they did finally arrest him.
Yeah.
And he's pleaded guilty for espionage. But shortly after the FBI ran someone at him, posed as a Cuban officer to try to turn him back on, he sent me an email to try to make contact with me. It's like, no, I'm not going to respond to that one. Thanks, Manny. Because I know you're spying to the other side.
Right.
But the point is we helped them do that.
Yeah.
When they captured Hugo Carvajal, the head of the DHS, we helped them find him.
Right.
They found him. They got him arrested. The Spanish let him escape. We helped find him a second time.
Yeah.
And then the Spanish held him for 4 years. They didn't want to extradite him to the United States. Why? Because he knows every one of them that was paid off. He knows everything.
There's a lot of internal collusion. Yeah. Yeah.
My point is, so we did all this whistleblowing on their money laundering.
Yeah.
We did all this election stuff. And then we've done the counterintelligence stuff for them because they weren't doing it.
Yeah.
It's really, and I've met some, and I brief congressmen and politicians, and they say, Gary, you're really kind of, you're overly emotional about this. Like, listen, I want to kick your ass. Okay. I'm really had enough with you people not doing your job. It's like, you think I'm emotional, huh? I've done the work. I've financed it myself. I've done everything but wipe your hiney. Okay. Done everything but wipe your heinies.
Yeah. So
please, if I'm a little testy about this, you're gonna have to understand that, because unbelievable, just unbelievable. The whole thing is. I wouldn't have believed it had I not lived through it myself.
No, it's unbelievable. The first time I heard it, I was just stunned, and I'm still stunned. It's just.
And then, Ralph, something else. Yeah. There were media that we went to. We went to journalists. One journalist with CBS, one with Fox. One with the Financial Times in London, and they were all afraid.
Yeah. They
were all afraid, especially if you're talking election results. Oh, no, can't do that. They're terrified of this thing.
Yeah.
And we showed them, here's the story, here's the evidence, here's the facts, here's the witnesses. Yeah. No, we won't be first.
Yeah.
We can't be first.
Wow. Well, the thing people have to remember is that this is not political. It's not one political party or the other. It's the country, it's the system that's being under attack by foreigners who are trying to undermine our democracy, and doing so, as you explained before, in 72 countries around the world. I mean, this is stunning. It's a global, it's a global operation.
It empowers the cartel.
Yeah.
It empowers these criminals. Are running the world.
Yeah.
The criminals are running the world.
Yeah.
It is Spectre.
And you're James Bond.
Well, yes, less hair and not as thin,
Well, Gary, thank you so much for doing this, and God bless you and your partner, and what an incredible undertaking.
Well, thank you, Ralph. You've been very kind, and your writing are fantastic, as always.
Thank you.
Biggest fan.
Let's try to get people's attention and stir up the pot here and have people examine the evidence. It's in the book that I wrote that's coming out called Stolen Elections, The Plot to Destroy Global Democracy. And it's on your website, stolenelectionsfacts.com. So we invite everybody to read the book and to look at the information, come to your own conclusions, but they're pretty hard not to see what's been going on.
The media is going to have a hard time looking away. Now, there's a level of, sadly, there's a level of collusion here, a significant level of collusion, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Absolutely. It will all coming out in the wash.
All coming out. That's right. Well, thank you, Gary. It's been a pleasure, and God bless you and your family, and thanks for fighting the good fight, man.
Took the oath. Lifetime. It's a lifetime thing. Took the oath twice. Thank you, Ralph.
Our enemies and the enemies of democracy, Venezuela, China, Iran, and Russia, with help from Cuba, Hezbollah, North Korea, Serbia, and the Open Society Foundations, are gearing up right now to steal this year's presidential election. And you can be sure that they're planning to put into office the candidate they believe will best serve their shared goal, which is to undermine the United States, to throw our political system into chaos, to make us citizens weak, confused, and frustrated so that they can take advantage and further their dark agenda. It's up to all of us who believe in freedom and support democratic government to stop them. I urge you all to read my new book, Stolen Elections, The Plot to Destroy Global Democracy, which is being published this month by Skyhorse Publishing. And to join me in thanking Gary Berntsen and the other brave government whistleblowers for their groundbreaking and critically important investigation into election fraud. It's my great honor to name the great Gary Berntsen as today's hero behind the headlines.
Heroes Behind Headlines. Executive producer Ralph Pizzulo. Produced and engineered by Mike Dawson. Music provided by Extreme Music. For exclusive content, please join our Patreon group at patreon.com/heroesbehindheadlines.